Martin Luther King summed it up. He said, I dream of a day that my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. And it is about those quiet and extrovert. I mean, Churchill and Kennedy were big extroverts, but Mandela and Gandhi were quiet leaders. So anybody can lead. It's just about getting the people around them that are going to complement them.
Hello, welcome back to What a Future. We had a pretty amazing time out last time with Amy Mencarelli. She gave us a really interesting insight into bringing Gen Zs along for the ride in the workplace. As she pointed out, this is the year that Gen Zs are going to overtake baby boomers. You can find her on LinkedIn, and of course you can find that episode on our YouTube channel. This week, though, we have Neil Tuson. Neil went from the Navy to working with Dale Carnegie. He's currently the founder of Perfect Teams, which is the instrument of choice for team development. He's also an author. He's got a favourite quote that I want to share with you. There's not a shred of evidence that life is serious. Neil, it's such a pleasure to have you with us. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Fraser. I think we're bridging the gap between Gen Z and the baby boomers here, aren't we?
Oh, I'm a proud millennial. Thank you very much. Look, you know the question. Let's get straight in. What is the biggest issue affecting the world of work right now?
I think it came up today. It's those interpersonal issues. I was talking to an HR director in a company. I'm doing a workshop there tomorrow. And it's how do their team leaders get the engagement with their team and overcome the conflicts in their team? And that's really going back to all those interpersonal issues and team leaders having the skill set to be able to coach and to listen and to, it really is that old Dale Carnegie, be genuinely interested in other people.
Absolutely. So what's the effect that we're kind of seeing from this? Can you give us an example of where this has shown itself quite strongly?
Well, I mean, the HR director Dave was saying it was just out and out conflict between these two team members, and then the team leader herself didn't have the skill sets and the knowledge and the depth to deal with it. So the HR director was called in. So I do quite often do workshops and I go, hands up if you work in a team. And all the hands go up. And then I say, keep them up if that team's perfect. And all the hands go down. And generally, just like that people smile or laugh. And I said, what are you laughing for? That's costing you money. If you're running a team and it's not working that effectively, it's costing you money. And the three main things that teams have to deal with, it's the quality of the team leaders. Are the team leaders fit for function? What's the communication like in that team? And then do they have the right mix of people? And of course, in a team, you're going to have a different mix of characters, you're going to have a different mix of personalities. But the team leader, I mean, people say that managers in Britain were not that good before COVID. Well, now with the hybrid working, an awful lot of people working from home, their skill set's got to be an order of magnitude better. And I was talking to somebody else that runs a business recently, and he said the biggest gap now, it's not the executive, it's not the directors, it's not the CEOs that are lacking the skills, it's the team leaders. A big gap between the people up here and the people that are actually running it. I mean, it's almost like going on the tube, mind the gap. I mean, the team leaders just don't have the same depth and the same knowledge, the same skill sets. And that's where the businesses are suffering.
Sure, and I suppose the question, the quote comes to mind from the Charter Management Institute about 66% of managers in the UK being accidental managers, i.e. they never set out to be managers, they never received any training to be managers, they just sort of got promoted and now they have a team working for them. When you're talking about this, and you know a lot more about sort of team makeup than I do here, are we talking of a particular type that needs to be the leader in this team, or are we talking of maybe lacking skills that can be taught, that can be grown? Is it nature or nurture? I suppose in this instance,
It's skills. It's skills every time. My background is engineering, so I've got a fine eye for the detail. I can do the calculations and the analysis. I realized that when I went into sales and I was with a big international manufacturing company, it was not my technical skills that were going to take me further forward. It's going to be my interpersonal skills.
Mhm.
Now, I could have just sat there and quietly and diligently got on and done my estimating and done my design and done my calculations. But I recognized that the people that really got on were the people who had the ability to build relationships, go out there and, yeah, press the flesh, talk to people. And so it was, when I failed at public speaking, that really was the sea change for me. And I just know that if you've got the ability, well, let's backtrack on that. I did this public speaking course because I'd failed and it cost me a lot of money and it cost the office a lot of money too because we didn't hit our annual budget. And I said to my boss at the time, "What should I do?" And he said, "Neil, you need to learn how to speak in public." So I went away and I was in the States at the time and I found a course and I came back and I said, "I want to do this one." He said, "Well, go on then." I said, "Well, it's $1,200. Now, this is the difference between America and the UK in my mind. He said, "So?" Because in America, you pay your own way, you make your own investments. So I paid for myself to do this public speaking course. And I absolutely loved it. About 3 months after I'd finished it, I belonged to an association. It was the Air Conditioning and Refrigeration, the American Society of Air Conditioning and Refrigeration Engineers, called ASHRAE. And I took the phone call one day, and this person on the end said, "Neil, Senator Brown can't make next month's meeting." I went, "Yeah." He said, "Well, we want you to do the keynote." I put the phone down and went, "Oh no," because I knew there was going to be 350 people in the room. But I gave myself a quick pep talk and I went, "Wait a minute, I've just done this public speaking course. This could be my graduation ceremony." So I crafted a talk. I did some memory stuff with it because in on the course you get to learn how to do memory tricks that you can actually put it all up here and you don't need notes. I can still see the hotel in Seal Beach, and this is in LA County, and 350 people all at round tables, raised dais. I get taken to the middle. I'm sitting there. I get introduced. Within 2 minutes, I had the audience in the palm of my hand. At the end of it, 20 minutes, no notes. The audience rose as one. I got a standing ovation. My boss came running out to me, "Neil, why didn't you do that at Huntington Hospital?" This is when I failed. And I said, "Steve, it wasn't that I couldn't. I'd never been shown how to." And as those words came out of my mouth, I thought, it wasn't that I couldn't. I'd never been shown how to. And I suddenly thought, that's all, that's it. That's the key. People turn around and they think they can't do it. They've just never been shown how to do things. And now, being an engineer, I like to make things simple. So I can show people. I could actually take you aside, and within, I'd say, 3 hours, Fraser, I could turn you into an exemplary public speaker because I know the tricks that you need. I know the processes that you need. And I can reduce things and cut to the chase of it. And I can teach people that. And I can show them how to do it because my engineering mind goes, make it simple. And I think a lot of people try to mystify it. When it comes down to consulting in a company and turning a company around, it really is quite simple if you know the process, if you know the procedures. If you want to learn how to sell, it's quite simple. If you need to learn how to present, it's quite simple. You just need somebody that's been there, done it, and can show you how to do it.
Sure, and I suppose so. What we're saying here is, I think that's a really interesting story that encapsulates. Here's a time when things were doing wrong. Off you go, you learn the thing, you come back, and thankfully, it went well and you smashed it. I've been lucky enough to see you speak myself, and it's brilliant. So I have no doubt. I think what we're trying to get at here, isn't it, is that these managers and these sort of senior team members. They haven't been shown how to, right? Like
They haven't.
we've
They haven't. The
generally
investment,
thrust them
the
into the
investment's not been
position.
made.
Sorry.
The investment's not been made.
Absolutely, and we're seeing this trend. Obviously, the Charter Management Institute statistic makes that very very clear that this is the case. So where do we I want to keep really nailing into like what is the effect that businesses are seeing from this? Where are we? What do those frictions look like? What do they feel like? In these teams when they're not working. Have you got an example of maybe when a team wasn't working and had a kind of tangible outcome that showed it wasn't working, I suppose?
Yeah, I was working with a company in Wimbledon. They were in all the data analysis around sports and using it for marketing. Very technical, very good, thriving business. But the chairman recognized they had two individuals on the board that were clashing like this. And he'd seen some of the work that I've done, and he said, Neil, I want you to come in and run a workshop. And so we did. We ran a process, and part of that was profiling them because we got our own intellectual property around profiling. And we developed a team map, and then it was the education and it was the participation. And what happened, it was beautiful. These two directors that were clashing like this were literally sitting opposite sides of the table. And in one of the exercises, I just paired them up and I got them to compare notes because there was a small report attached. And they read through the reports, they looked at each other and they started laughing. And they suddenly went, we get it. Now we know why. And quite often, what happens in these scenarios is there's this subjective thing going on, almost like the elephant. Well, a friend of mine, he's Canadian. He said there was a moose in the room that nobody was talking about. The proverbial elephant. Yeah, there's this moose in the room that nobody's talking about, so everybody tiptoes around it. And so, therefore, because it's subjective, and everybody's kind of frightened of naming it and nailing it, it never actually gets resolved. But if you can create a dialogue and process between, it's like bringing warring parties together. You've got to find a point of commonality. If there's a divide there and no point of commonality, you're not going to resolve the conflict.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been involved with people that have done a lot of peacemaking work. And I know from old, bring the parties together, get it visible, get the dialogue going, and you can actually solve the biggest issues going. So what we did in this workshop is we got these two knocking heads together. The dialogue started, the healing started in that conversation, and they just laughed about it at the end of the day. The chairman afterwards said that was absolutely priceless because we have been tiptoeing around that issue for so long.
And did you ever catch up with them afterwards about what the effect of that was? How that had an impact on their business.
Yeah, well, it was a classic front office, back office. For anybody that's worked in the city, in let's say a brokerage firm or a trading house, you've always got the front office and the back office. And the back office are the people that take care of all the administration, they do all the reconciliations, the accounts, the finance. The front office is always the people that are out there, they're building the relationship, they're bringing the business in. It's kind of like the proverbial hunter and farmer type mentality. And you always see these conflicts in organizations between front office and back office. The front office is out there, large in it, bringing the business in, quite often ego driven. Quite often there's a kind of a power thing going on. Hey, look, we're the kings of the mountain. We're making things happen. Back office, it all gets thrown. They got to deal with it all. And this was a classic front office, back office. And by getting them to respect what each brought to the equation. The person that was back office respected the guy called Jim had to go out there and bring the business in. So therefore, he had a different characteristic. He was probably going to cut corners. He was probably going to be very expedient with things. He wanted to just throw it in and have it resolved. The person there having to receive it all got the other guy to actually just get them to respect what each brings to the equation, because there are strengths in both.
Yeah, and
No,
you
no,
need both.
no. You need, it's a yin and yang thing. You need both sides of the equation.
And I think, I've seen a little bit of the kind of perfect teams methodology here, and it talks a lot about making sure that you have different sort of representations of different character types, within a team, and then being able to sort of respect and have those in the open means that you can have these kind of conversations, right? I think there's almost there's a psychological sort of human flaw, really, where we all catch ourselves thinking, why can't they just be more like me? And I think I've said it on this podcast before. I used to think this a lot, um, and now I read a few books on the sort of psychology, and I got a little bit further into it. And I think actually, thank God not everyone's like me, because that would be awful. um, and being able to
Be a
kind of
chaotic world.
it would. But yeah, being able to have those conversations, and sometimes it is just like cutting through that sort of difference, really, isn't it? And showing how people interact differently. I think that there's a whole human-wide issue, perhaps, that we don't do this enough, and yet. Many of us go to work every day, and many of us feel these issues day to day. And many businesses that have these issues are then inheriting, those problems. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, and again, it's back to there's a lot of assumptions that get made. I mean, I'll give you a classic this afternoon. I'm preparing for this workshop tomorrow in an engineering company, and we have profiled the whole company, so we know the characters involved in the company, and they are heavily blue and logical and process oriented. But it's an engineering company, and so you would want people that are going to follow the process. Because if they don't follow the process and get the calculations right, things blow. Think of the Challenger spacecraft. They
Yes.
didn't do the right conversion metric, and therefore the O-rings were the wrong size, and so the thing blew up. When
Yeah.
you have big projects and you've got engineers involved, they are there to make sure things are safe. Yeah. I would imagine a lot of structural engineers are looking at that bridge in Baltimore going right now, man, maybe we needed a bigger safety factor in here somewhere. Maybe something, bollards around the. Anyway, another subject. So engineers like to make sure things are right, dotting the i's and crossing it. It's about process. But the HR director made an assumption because we're doing a workshop with the team leaders, and she assumed they were all going to be logical. And she said, "How are we going to deal with that? Because they're all going to be logical." I said, "Annette, I've done the team map. They're not." She said, "Oh," I said, "they are the smallest group. These people that are running the teams are more empathetic. They're more instinctive." I said, "Yes, your firm as a whole is process oriented, but your team leaders are actually the ones that have got the empathy and the ability to build relationships and to make decisions." She went, "Oh." So even though she's been trained up, she had made an assumption. And so what happens is people that are running businesses have to get the facts. Exactly who have you got in the equation? What is the makeup of your team? Where are the core strengths? But most importantly, in a team, what are you missing?
So we've talked there about the sort of conflict within teams, be that sort of interpersonal conflict, but also about the importance of making sure that lots of different personality types are represented, so that we can create I suppose a team that's greater than the sum of its parts. That's maybe one way to sort of look at it. But I'm keen to move into the second question. What does a world look like where we fix this? What does a world look like where everyone has perfect teams? Can you shed some light on that?
Well, it would be quite utopian, wouldn't it, if everybody had a perfect team? But essentially, it's team by team. So, what does a perfect team look like? It's not going to have those conflicts. It's not going to have those interpersonal issues. There are contextually 5 things that perfect teams can tick. The first one is dependability. So, a perfect team, people know that they can depend on each other. That people are going to turn up, that that when something happens and it gets passed on, it's going to happen. So there's dependability and functionality in the team for things happening. A perfect team has structure and clarity. So there's a cohesive structure around it. People know what they're doing, right roles, right seats, to use somebody else's terminology. Right roles. But when you have the right people in the right roles doing the right things, well, you know, even just saying it, you get the sense that the things are going the right way. Um, People need to feel they can have an impact. Um, I've been on a team where I couldn't make an impact. It didn't matter what I said and what I did. It wasn't going to play out. It wasn't going to get accepted at the court because I was just, excuse me, this young upstart coming up with these crazy ideas. The fact is, they were brilliant ideas. And in fact, perfect teams is the result of me taking that idea and going and doing it myself. Because this could have happened in another organization that didn't accept. So therefore, I couldn't have the impact. And if you've got a team and people come up with great ideas and you're not listening to them, you're not listening for ways to improve, you won't have a perfect team, and that will cost you somewhere down the line. People need to have it's almost like that innate feeling of contributing and doing. People will work on things for their own sense of well-being and furtherance much harder than they sometimes will work at the job. Look at the amount of time and effort people put into their own interests. I mean, it's an inordinate amount more time and effort than they sometimes put into their job. But so quite often they're doing it because they don't feel they can make an impact in the job that they're doing. They're just going through the routine. They're going through the process to pick up the paycheck, to go and do what they truly love doing. So a perfect team is going to have people that really want to feel a part of it and they can make an impact. A perfect team is going to have a deep sense of meaning. People feel something, they feel a sense of belonging or they feel a sense of moving toward it. Has a purpose attached to it. I've said for years, no why, no way. If you don't tell me why it's important to do something, why it's relevant to me, I won't get off my backside and go next door. But tell me why it's important to me. I'll walk over cut glass to John O'Groats to get there because it's vitally important. And people in perfect teams, they know why they're doing it. There's a deep sense of purpose. Outside of the impact that they're making, they feel like they can belong and make the contribution. And then the fifth aspect is psychological safety. Now, how safe do people feel? Are they allowed to speak up? Are they allowed to call things out? Are they allowed to name things? Are they allowed to, but not blow the whistle? Because if you had a perfect team, it wouldn't be whistle blowing. But are they allowed to call out behaviours and things that are wrong, that don't match their value set? The crux of it all, though, Fraser, is communication. Are people communicating in all the different flavors and nuances that one word? And the thing is, most people don't understand what communication is. A lot of people think that the communication is a 50-50, it's a two-way street. It's not, it's a two-way. It's a two-way process where both parties have to respect and acknowledge and feedback, and there has to be listening and there has to be transmitting. It's a process. Most people don't actually understand what communication is. And so a perfect team does. But most importantly, the team leader understands it and gets it all and knows how to provide the structure and the clarity, knows how to communicate, knows how to get the best from people, knows how to nurture people, knows how to allow people to make an impact. It can seem complex, but when you break it apart, it really is quite simple. And I think if
Yeah, I think.
the more people attend to those issues, the more perfect their teams are going to be.
Absolutely, and I think that that plays into of course what we were talking about before. I mean, those five values that you mentioned, very they ring true to me. I've read about them in other circles as well, and the one that always gets me is psychological safety, because to me it feels like the root of everything has to be psychological safety. If you don't have that, if you don't have that sort of underpinning ability to say, hang on, I'm not really sure about that, without fear, then it's difficult to get the rest. And yet, if you do have it, the rest falls into place, because someone will just sit in the corner and say, "But why are we here? Why are we having this meeting?" And those sorts of questions, they train that. Well, this is the reason. Like, we're here because I have this problem. I need you guys help, to solve it. And that action that comes off the back of the people's ability to just kind of say what they think for the betterment of the team. And it's important to make sure that it's, for the betterment of the team. It's not okay in the corner to go, "Oh, you've got a really ugly cat. Did you know that?" Or whatever the conversation happens to be. But, though, when you've got that, this builds into a team that, as I said a minute ago, is like greater than the sum of its parts. It becomes its own kind of beast that tackles things. And we've seen this, throughout history of businesses, that often we talk of sort of like superstar CEOs and big leaders who come in and make big changes, but actually it's often the team that they lead that does everything, right? Like, one person can't do everything, especially in a larger organization, and so the team is vital. If you don't have the team, it doesn't kind of really matter how good the CEO is. You need that team to create this atmosphere, to create this position. The leader brings all that together, and you get stuff done. You go into a room with a problem, you come out with a solution.
Yeah, I mean, there are a myriad of different examples and exercises you can do about the power of the group. But the fundamental truth is a team's going to take you much, much further than an individual can do it on their own. It leverages the opportunity, and no great enterprise on earth has ever happened without a team of people and teams of people. It's practically impossible. I've got a little exercise that I use to illustrate this, and it's people quite often don't understand the difference between 1,000, a billion, and 1,000, a million, a billion, and a trillion. Now, they roll the numbers out, but the fact of the matter is that if you took a grain of sand and it was a cubic millimeter, 1,000 grains of sand would fill a volume the size of a marble, maybe 12 millimeters across. That's very tangible. Most people get that. And you could do that individually. You could go pick a grain of sand and get 1,000 grains of sand quite easily. A million, well, it's got to be 10 times the diameter. So maybe 12 centimeters, maybe the size of a bowling ball, a lawn bowls ball, 5 inches across, probably weighs about 12 pounds. You could probably get a million. Now, 1,000 seconds is not too long, but a million seconds is about 12 days. So most people go, okay, on my own, I could probably go pick a million grains of sand and it's going to take me 12 days. Okay, I'm prepared to do that. A billion would be the size of a huge, great big yoga ball. Now, a billion, 1 grain of sand a second, is going to take you 12 years. You can't do that on your own. The moment you start going up the scale, let alone a trillion, that's going to take you 32 millennia. Yeah? You will not get from the millions to the billions to the trillions unless you have teams of people. It has to be a collective enterprise. And perfect teams recognize that collectively they can do more together than an individual can do on their own. So I challenge you, go get a million grains of sand. It's going to take you 12 days, but you're never going to get to a billion, and let alone you're never going to get to a trillion.
Absolutely, and so we need people to follow this through for us, because as we say, like, resource runs out. Like, physically, obviously, resource runs out. One man can't run Coca-Cola. It takes everyone that works at Coca-Cola to run Coca-Cola, and making sure that these teams sort of communicate. I think you said that of course a team can do more than a single individual, but I think it's probably also true that a team of five can do more than five individuals.
Oh,
if
totally.
the team is good.
Totally.
But that's the crucial thing, right? Like the team has to be good.
And it has the structure and the clarity, and everybody feels like, it's about bringing it cohesively together. And that comes down to the team leader's skill set on being able to bring those people together and getting them to collectively join together on that endeavor. And what are
Sure.
their
And so
skill sets?
I'm
What are
sorry.
their skill sets like? Do they have the skills to be able to do that, to bring people together?
Sure. So I suppose that one of the questions, we've talked here about people who lead with the head, people who lead with the heart, people who lead with their gut. Um, I'm interested. Is there an archetypal leader that truly works? Like we see, often in the media, we tend to see big, loud, charismatic people being lauded as great leaders. Often the literature that you read about it says actually it's not that clear. Some leaders are quite quiet and introverted. Some leaders are very open and loud. And I'm getting the impression through this conversation that there's kind of room for a leader of any type as long as they've also got everyone else. Do you think that's true?
Yeah, hallelujah, definitely. There's a woman called Susan Cain. She wrote a book called Quiet and has done a TED talk. The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And she says the archetypal leader nowadays has to be the big I am projection, extroverted. And she calls it the extrovert ideal. And she said it would be practically impossible to get into Harvard and do an MBA unless you project yourself as the big I am. And she said that's because society has changed. It used to be about a person's character. Now it's about a person's personality. And she said it's time we went back to an age of character where a person's character counts. So I don't actually talk about personality in my processes and with my tools. I talk about people's characters. And Martin Luther King summed it up. He said, I dream of a day that my children will be judged not by the color of their skin, but by their character. And it is about those quiet and extrovert. I mean, Churchill and Kennedy were big extroverts, but Mandela and Gandhi were quiet leaders. So anybody can lead. It's just about getting the people around them that are going to complement them because there's a space for being loud and noisy. There's a space for being quiet. There's a space for being process oriented. There's a space for dropping it. There's a space for building relationship. There's a space for dropping it. There's a space for being down and dirty and instinctive. And there's a space for dropping it. A leader can come from any of those domains. Just that the ideal gets mythologized.
I think
And
that's a really interesting insight there. I think it's a really maybe quite a neat place to end the conversation. I mean, I think if I take a stab at summing up, what we've just said, having harmony within a team. Right at the beginning, where I asked you the second question, you said this is utopia, and like this is what we can aim for, right? Like human collaboration is incredible, and so we need a good leader, we need a good team, and we need all of those five attributes that you put out there. But actually, it doesn't need to be we need that person to be the leader. Like the leader can come from anywhere. They just need to build the right group of people around them. Is that summing up what we've said
totally,
there?
totally. The leader, the team starts with the leader, and the leader needs to know where they are, sit themselves, and then they build the team around to complement them.
Excellent. Look, if people want to find out a bit more about you, where's the best place to get hold of you?
Perfectteams.co.uk.
And I believe you're also on LinkedIn, aren't you?
I am. Neil
Excellent.
Tuson,
So
yes.
people can find you there too. Look, Neil, it's been a really,
Neil,
really
Neil
interesting.
Tuson, Perfect Teams.
Great. It's been a really, really interesting conversation, I think, going from that kind of like focusing on all the problems and then like really kind of getting into like, what does this world look like? Because we've all sat there in those crappy meetings with those team members and we thought, oh, God, please, no. And yet there's a way through. There's a way through that doesn't mean leaving and going somewhere
There
else,
is.
which is, you know,
It's not that I. It's not that I couldn't. I was never shown how to. There is a.
that's
There's.
it.
There's an easy way to solve these conundrums, Fraser.
Absolutely. And it's to call you. Shameless plug. Look,
Thank you very
it's
much.
been a real pleasure, Neil. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.